Yeah, I think it was very competitive. I mean, there were rumors that Netflix was going to ultimately get Oprah, but it speaks to the point that Apple's tiptoed into content. They realize in this content arms race going on, they need to significantly step up their game. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. To ultimately, we believe that they could spend, call it $2.5 to $3 billion in content over the next year versus the reported under $1 billion that they're spending today.
Wow. I mean, Netflix already spends what? $8 billion. So Ed, I mean, it sort of explains why we're seeing things like AT&T buy Time Warner and Comcast and Disney try to have a bidding war for some of these assets for Fox, that Apple and Netflix are the competition.
Right. I mean, it's a fight for content, and to get the content, you need to do a land grab for talent. These sort of first look deals and these overall deals mimic like what the networks were doing, 10, 20 years ago to sort of keep these guys in place. The other context, though, is that $1 billion or even $2 billion spend. HBO spends $2.5 billion a year. Hulu spends $2.5 billion a year. Netflix probably $10 billion next year. So even at $1 billion or $2 billion, it's maybe not quite enough. It's a big first step for Apple, and I think it's sort of an outline of the start of the media strategy. But if they really want to win, they need to spend more.
Hey, Ed, we had Ben Silverman on last hour, of course, the former head of NBC Entertainment, himself a very successful independent producer. But he said he was concerned that when all's said and done, that you're going to see content in the hands of fewer players out there. And he worries about, the prices paid and what it's going to do to independent producers and different voices that need to be heard as this content just continues to proliferate out there. What do you think?
That's actually a great point. I think what's interesting is that despite the fact that there's more money in content, we're at the golden age of television, as everyone says, the infrastructure around Hollywood hasn't really changed all that much. It's just everyone's getting paid that much more and people are getting locked down, but it hasn't actually sort of spilled over into their independent scene, where you might find the next sort of creative talent that you otherwise wouldn't see. And I think that's a legitimate concern. At the same time, companies like Netflix are trying all different types of content, niched content that might appeal to a smaller base, but that in aggregate makes up for the cost. So unless we see more of those specific types of strategies, yeah, it could lock down the infrastructure and just make independent scene harder.
When you take a look at what the direction is, Dan, in terms of this sort of media landscape and all the deal making that's getting done, it seems like content is king. But is content plus distribution, is that necessarily what you need to be sort of the dominant player there? Or can you be standalone content? I'm asking because Apple's striving to be a little bit of both. The distribution is in the form of these guys that we all have in our hands. And then they're trying to build out their content business.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that's been the disappointing thing to many on the street, that when you look at content, what could have happened years ago with the potential acquisition of Netflix, they have the distribution, now it's about the content. I do think it's going to be part of both in terms of that balance, and that's why with what we saw this week with AT&T Time Warner kicking off, this content arms race has now gone to a next level. And what Apple realizes, you've seen the Sony executive hires, they're going to have to significantly step up the game. Ed hit on it. Is $3 billion enough? Might it be $5, $6, $7 billion? Is a standalone service for content finally on the horizon?
Do you get more bullish on Apple, though, if it does that? If it triples what it spends on content or what it's planning to? Does that make you more enthusiastic about the stock?
Yeah, in my opinion, if they do that, significantly more bullish, even though we are bullish, because ultimately that's sort of the next leg on the stool. You talk about software services, but now from a total addressable market opportunity, Apple, given that market share, this could be a game changer, and that's why today was that first sort of toe in the water.